Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. You know, there's a lot of people with predictive theories, trade signals that they use to predict the market. And then, of course, there's following Nancy Pelosi's stock picks. That might be the best signal of all. But anyways, there's all kinds of signals and strategies. But the one strategy that seems to be the most consistent, the most ironclad, more than any Wall Street analyst or politician or AI algorithm could ever produce, is the reverse Cramer index. Yeah, pretty much if Jim Cramer says sell, you buy. If Jim Cramer predicts a crash, buckle up for the rally. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that as financial advice. I'm not advocating for anybody to use this strategy, but you have to admit Jim Cramer does seem to be wrong about almost literally everything. The man's financial takes are so catastrophically wrong so consistently that the internet now makes his predictions as an indicator to do the opposite. And once again, of course, he's done it. We played the clip a couple days ago where Jim Cramer was predicting a Black Monday coming on Monday. Oh, right as the markets open, it's over.
The president doesn't try to reach out and reward these countries and companies that play by the rules in the 1987 scenario. The one where we went down 3 days and then down 22% on Monday has the most cogency. We will not have to wait out too long, will we? We'll know by Monday. Fortunately, we had an excellent set of employment numbers today. At least it makes it less likely a crash will necessarily lead to a recession. But if President Trump stays intransigent and does nothing to ameliorate the damage that I saw these last 2 days, I'm not going to be constructive here. I will contain my anger, but only because I lived through 87, and in the end, I came out okay. I was in cash for the crash. I know what this feels like. Oh, and if Europe moves against our fabulous tech companies next week, then I will be furious. That I promise you. Because it should not happen.
And then guess what happened? The markets bounced back. The markets seemed to stabilize. We found a little bit of resistance. And this is proof that they are just selling panic. It's the same old cynical game. Let's talk about the markets, shall we? We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so we heard all the doom and gloom, right, and all the predictions. These tariffs are going to destroy the economy. And basically the argument that they were making was that people were going to continue to panic sell off their positions and the market would keep tanking precipitously. But it was pretty obvious that that take was going to age like old milk let out in the sun. I knew deep down inside that this was the classic fear bait. There's no evidence of economic collapse looming. There's no death spiral, no massive financial cataclysm that we've experienced. No, quite to the contrary, all the economic indicators that we've seen were quite strong. We just got all the reports for March. Sure, we saw a slight uptick in unemployment, but it's nothing to be freaking out over. And if we're talking about jobs, actually the job report was quite bullish, especially considering the fact it was mostly concentrated within the private sector. What we have right now, we haven't seen any evidence of a collapsing economy. Maybe we're going to see short-term shrinkage, which in a certain way, considering the global trade shakeup, is to be expected. But we haven't even seen that yet. And we don't know how long most of these tariffs are going to be applied. So basically, what we saw was a temporary emotional sell-off, which was totally predictable. And now it seems like the markets have stabilized after a roughly 17% sell-off from the highest peak.
The first rule, particularly for the smaller investors out there, you can't lose money unless you sell. And right now, the smart strategy is not to panic, just stay in, because we are going to have the biggest boom in the stock market we've ever seen under the Trump policies. We will find a bottom in this market quickly. We will hit 50,000 on the Dow easily by the end of this term.
It's not surprising at all. In fact, it's exactly what I was expecting. And frankly, I find it kind of motivating. I'm sensing a great deal of patriotism, to be quite honest, as people are not buying into the collapse narrative. No, they're seeing right through it and they're buying right back into the markets. It seems like what they're doing is buying into the American vision that Donald Trump is laying out in his policy decisions. And I've been talking to folks and I've noticed that most people actually aren't buying into the panic. There's some people that are getting swept up by all the doom and gloom rhetoric in the mainstream media, but most people, I think, are looking at this as an opportunity, looking at the market that in a way has been overvalued for a long time. And now it feels like everything's on sale. I mean, that's what the vibe looks like. I even have one friend who was stockpiling some cash in a savings account. He intended on using that money to renovate his home, and this is money outside of his retirement savings. And guess what he told me? He said, actually, I think we're going to postpone the renovations, and we're going to try to find the market low here and invest into the market. oh, the American economy is collapsing. Give me a freaking break. None of this is surprising. In fact, it's the ebbs and flows.
You want to talk about the markets correcting? Yes, they are. By the way, markets correct every 18 months up to 20%. You're watching it happen right now. It's not pleasant. You can't blame just the tariffs for this. These have been very expensive markets now for almost 18 months. Now they're having a correction. I think what matters is this a recession signal, yes or no? And how long will these tariffs be on? I would say 50% of these tariffs across these 60 countries will be negotiated pretty quickly.
Market's correct. It's part of the natural process, especially after having 2 years of unsustainable growth during the debt stacking Biden years. We've seen a massive speculative bubble. It seems like investing fundamentals have gone out the window. We're seeing companies with massive PE ratios. And so obviously when you have that much betting going on in the markets, that much speculation, there's bound to be some fluctuation. There's bound to be some volatility, especially if the president's coming in and taking on the entire world in global trade. Really, what I think we saw was a little bit of profit taking, and then of course, panic sellers, people who frankly probably shouldn't be in the markets in the first place, because clearly they're way too emotional getting their economic news from Rachel Maddow and Harry Sisson, and here they are making emotional decisions, selling their stocks thinking it's all going to zero. It's not. And obviously, smart investors understand this. Panic sellers almost always lose. The game is long term. Not buying into the media's fear-mongering garbage, where they stoke fear in order to bait your view or your click, but no, making logical, rational decisions, and most importantly, looking at the long term. The idea that tariffs are going to destroy everything seems absurd, and if anything, again, it's just a realignment. I'm not thinking the American economy is going to collapse, I'm just thinking, where are the next opportunities? What companies are now at a discount that could potentially stand to benefit, given these new trade dynamics and new trade deals that are coming in? If we start seeing foreign nations dropping their trade barriers, which American companies are going to thrive? If we start seeing reciprocal tariffs that level the playing field with Beijing, for instance, what American industries are going to start dominating? That's where my brain's at, and apparently I'm not the only one feeling this way.
We absolutely have had a couple people anxious about the stock market. But again, our goal is that we're going to sell millions more dollars, so we have to hire many more people. If we do that, we're going to hire them at very good jobs, with very good pay, wonderful benefits with the 401k match. True, there's some companies that have been buying T-shirts from Vietnam and China, and they're going to have to pay a couple more bucks for a T-shirt. And then the American consumer is going to have to pay more for a T-shirt. That's obviously not pleasant for those American consumers. But I think there's going to be an overwhelming surge of hiring in America as things level out, as American factories ramp up and people have to hire talent, buy machines. We've invested money in buying new machines because we're so enthusiastic, so optimistic about the future. That's going to start happening throughout the nation, and people are going to be leaning into the future. This is a very exciting time for the American manufacturing worker. We're going to be able to pull people from poverty into the middle class that used to not have an avenue. They had no shot at getting into the middle class.
If anything, I'm kind of more bullish than ever before. The smart thing in these situations is to not panic. And given the news that we've been seeing, there's all this fear around tariffs, but things change real fast. And given all the movement that we've seen on all of these trade deals and negotiations happening, the likelihood is a good chunk of these tariffs, if not a majority, probably won't even be here in 6 months. And if that's the case, if the Trump administration continues to make progress in these negotiations, well, then I think it's less likely that we see a recession and more likely that we see an absolute freaking boom, especially after such a massive sell-off. It's called volatility for a reason. A lot of the times markets go up just as fast as they go down, and sometimes even faster. And if things go well, we got all this money on the sidelines. If we start to see some positive news, a lot of it's going to be mobilized and put in the markets. And again, in that environment, American companies could potentially be in a better and more competitive environment than they've been in decades. So basically all this to say, we don't know what's going to happen, but if you play the media's game, if you fall for their tactics, you're likely to lose and lose big. You shouldn't be making decisions based on short-term volatility. If you're invested in the markets, your view should always be long-term. Black Monday this, Black Monday that, economic collapse, tariff mania, whatever the frick they're talking about. Don't care, I'm betting on America. And it pretty much ends there. Anyways, that's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.